So this is Julie Harris Walker of the Other 50%, A Herstory of Hollywood, and I am on my way to the Women in Entertainment Summit. This, to me, is one of the best events of the year. I went last year, and it was the day after the election. So you can imagine the feeling in the room of all the women in Hollywood. There was a lot of open weeping, let me just say that, but it was so comforting to be in a room with a bunch of people who felt the same way. And that was a lot of the conversation of, oh, we aren't where we thought we were, and there's still a lot of work to do. And here we are a year later, and boy, have things changed. It's striking, the difference between last year and this year. I think, well, at least I had a perception of where we were a year ago, because it looked like we were about to have a female president and we'd come a long way. And then the election happened and I realized, oh no, we still have a lot of work to do. And now here we are having the summit again a couple weeks after the Harvey Weinstein of it all, and metoo, and the veil being ripped off of Hollywood and the power structures and the abuse and the sexual assault and the sexual harassment. And it really feels to me like a watershed moment. And I know we've had a lot of watershed moments, and there are varying levels of optimism as to what's going to happen from here and where do we go. But I got to tell you, this one feels different to me. It feels much more transparent. People are taking action. So many people are speaking up. I got to think it's going to make some kind of difference. Okay, anyway, I'm headed to the summit. I will let you know what happens when I get there. I'm going to talk to people, get their reactions, tell you about the panels and the speakers. I'm really excited. Okay, stay tuned. Although the program didn't really take on sexual harassment directly, there was a lot of chatter in the hall about it, and I caught up with a few people and had some conversations that I will share with you in a bit. But the day started out with Geena Davis. The Geena Davis Institute for Gender and Media Studies has provided a heap of data surrounding women and girls in media, and she presented some of the data on the day, and as usual, representation of women on screen and behind the scenes is still dismally small. But the good news is there are some very easy fixes. And this is a point that really resonated with a lot of people. Media can actually fix the problem it has created. I'm going to say that again. Media can actually fix the problem it has created. It is just that powerful. For example, if you're writing a script and there is a board meeting, simply write, the board of directors, half of whom were women, were in the room. And boom, you're done. If you don't write it in, you run the risk of it not occurring to whoever is populating that scene to mix it up. But once you do that, and people start to see corporate boards made up of women, it is not too far a jump for people to start seeing women on corporate boards as a normal thing. It's simple, but it's powerful. And another thing you can do is do a gender pass on your whole script. If there are not enough women, go through it and just change some names. And then you're done. There was also a lot of talk at the conference about the parts that we as women own, namely confidence and advocacy. Things said over and over again is one thing that will hold you back is your confidence. Even if you're pretending, be fearless about your work. Live your life as hard as you can and ask for those promotions and raises. And when you're in a position to hire, ask for the list of women. They exist, but you usually don't get them until you specifically ask to see the women. And then once you hire them, it's also about promoting and developing them. Now, during the lunch break, I caught up with McKenna, Koon, and Dana Kelly, who both work at FullScreen, and they had this to say.
I am McKenna Koon. I'm a creative strategist and writer for FullScreen Media, and so far, I am, first of all, inspired by everybody that's here at the summit and at the conference. And I think the learnings that we heard at the beginning of the day from Geena Davis were really impactful. It's the hard data that really makes you go, wait a minute, this is actually something that really does still happen and needs a lot of attention.
And the data's kind of the same year after year after year. Like, do you have a sense of what we can really do to shift it?
I think those seemingly small changes that she suggests, where, looking at the script and if it's a male character, changing it to a female. And honestly, I think it's getting our male counterparts to be informed about this kind of stuff just as much as we are, because it really does take both sides to make a change. I think those are like the first things that come top of mind. Yeah. What about you?
I'm Dana Kelly from FullScreen Media. I think also there needs to be a real change to the internship and assistant culture. The only people that oftentimes can afford an unpaid internship are people who are already coming from a place of privilege. So I think that assistant levels and entry-level positions that are critical for your success in this industry, that are, often sort of an assumed step in the climb. I think those need to be more accessible and compensated. We need to look at who we're recruiting for entry-level positions and how we're compensating them. I know the unpaid internship sort of saga goes much beyond this industry, but I think it speaks volumes about the kind of people who get in from the ground floor right out of school and can afford to take those risks that are technically investments in their future, but...
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I think actually labor law is changing.
Yeah.
So you can't not pay people anymore, although I'm sure people still do.
Exactly. And that's, I don't know how to institutionalize or correct the culture of it, but I know that I benefited from an unpaid internship, and since going to these sort of conferences throughout the past year, I realized that in itself was a huge privilege. And
I think, too, one thing that can be done, I work in a writer's room, and I've seen certain sketches that we make where they are written primarily by men, and straight men at that, but the characters are female, and some of them are LGBTQ, and sometimes, it's unintentional just because of the staffing, but certain things are written without the authentic perspective. We've been doing a good job of correcting that with the work that we do, but it still happens every once in a while because it's just so embedded in the institution of entertainment to have more men and more straight men again. So I think it's looking at who the writers are, looking who's on the team and on the crew, and when you notice something, rather than attacking what's going on, saying hey, I noticed this, what if we try and switch it up a little bit. It's like one of the speakers said, being part of the solution is something that is really important too as women, jumping in and recognizing where it's at and being let's try and make this better together.
Because of where we are in time, can I ask you about the Harvey Weinstein of it all and the Me Too of it all? What is it feels to me like we are at a watershed moment that is different. What are you guys seeing and feeling about it?
I was just showing her right before this that there's a shitty men of media list that's been circulated as a Google Doc between a few hundred women, and it's just naming everyone in publishing and media that's allegedly, done stuff. And it's circular done stuff being they have been accused of assault. I think it's good. It's one of those things, and someone was speaking about it earlier. It's you need to hear people talking about these things so you're not crazy. I've had, I have my own Me Too story of being a 22-year-old in Hollywood and having a business meeting over drinks that, the guy wants to take me to a photo booth and makes out with me, and he's paying me. So I didn't tell anyone, and I really didn't think about it, and it was because I assumed that was the part of the normal ladder climbing. And, I've had a few other moments, and I guess I didn't realize how symbolically big those were until you hear the Me Too's. And, I think it's an important moment. It's a hard thing for me to reconcile, though, the legality of it. The judicial system is innocent until proven guilty, but we know that the arc of justice has not typically favored women, especially women who make allegations. So I'm all about this like crowdsourced sisterhood of like victims speaking up.
Yeah, I wonder about the legality of that Google Doc.
But I get, well, it's been taken off, and Reddit posted it, someone bought it, and he won't name names because his lawyer won't allow him to. It's like,
and now it's in the court of public opinion.
Yeah, it's a court of public opinion, so I am here for it. I support the women. I believe the women. I think it's hard because it forces you to recognize things and moments in your own life that you may not have looked at with a critical lens. It makes you...
Do you think if it happens again to you, you'll respond differently?
Absolutely. But I also think youth and naivety is like a part of that. I was 22, and someone who paid my paycheck, who was recommended to me by someone, a family friend who I respect, like I don't want to go back to them and be like, hey, that guy you recommended I work for is a creep. I just sort of locked it away. But now I feel confident in recognizing that is a clear abuse of power. But there's a while when you're young and you're female and you assume that things are the way they are.
Yeah, I have been lucky enough not to have experienced a situation that extreme. I haven't experienced assault per se, thank God. Of course, throughout my life, I'm sure I've experienced harassment and not said something. More so growing up around boys my age, men my age. I think it starts at a young age for men, and toxic masculinity is a big part of that. But I can speak to in terms of, the role moving forward that, we play in it in the media is to ensure that it's not just part of this news cycle and that the conversation continues. I think that's really important. Yes, I think it's a watershed moment completely, and I think it needs to keep continuing. In France, in terms of like what it's going to turn into, I don't know if you know about this, but as regarding legislation, they're potentially going to start introducing fines for catcalling or harassment on the street, and so that's one small step. But that could be something that starts popping up in the U.S. where it just turns into a little bit more, legislation against certain actions. It's tricky, it's tough, but I think the conversation should keep going on, and I think it will keep going on, and I think it's just going to keep going on because it's so widespread and hasn't been talked about as much as it should. Yeah.
I think it also just makes me happy that people who might have considered themselves allies, men in the industry in the past, are now seeing, have had a paradigm shift. I work with some men who have worked with Harvey very closely in the past, who have worked with Brett Ratner, the latest director, to be called out. And they said, oh yeah, I've seen him act inappropriately at Victoria's Secret parties. I've seen him do this. And, it's like, okay, then you're part of the problem. But
and what did you do?
Yeah, but what did you do? You didn't do anything, and it's hard for me to reconcile because I love the men I work with, but to hear about them being silent in the past, I hope that it can be a learning moment, not like a prosecution moment, because I love the men in my life and the supportive men in my career and that I work with, and I guess I'm hoping that it's a vehicle for a dialogue that's not doesn't persecute them. Didn't know how to, even if that was a word.
Well, did you hear Lindy West on NPR yesterday?
No, I didn't.
She said we don't have to destroy everybody. We just want them to behave better. Mm-hmm. That's all we want.
I think that just being accountable, and women have had to be accountable for so much. It's our outfits, or how drunk we were, or you got knocked out. Like, we've always had to be these accountable people, and I think because of that, we have this sense of responsibility and like martyrhood, and like I can carry it all on my shoulders. But it's a nice reminder that it's like, no, there are other people that need to have eyes and be accountable and speak up and tell stories. And
yeah, it's like, the woman needs to set the pace in the relationship because the man is just completely like a slave to his sex drive. Like, that's insane. That's not how it should be, but that's the way that it's become because that's just how society has been for so long. And I feel like that's starting to change because people are really starting to really talk about it in the media. Yeah.
It seems to me that such a shift is required, and it's going to take a big shift from men. and I'm not seeing very much leadership to guide them into that change.
That is one thing that I've talked about with my friends as this has come up, is like all these women are coming out and saying like me too, me too, me too, but there's obviously, we've seen not men coming forward saying, yeah, I'm a harasser. It's like, so who are harassing these women? Ghosts? Like just ghosts going around and no. But, you know, men don't want to admit it. I think in terms of leadership, that will need to come from the male side. I don't know. I can't even imagine what that's going to look like, you know, especially in the ecosystem that we're currently in politically.
I mean, it'll be exciting when we see it. And I always think when men figure out how sexy women find a feminist man.
Yeah, actually, and there you go. Another power in the media. Show it in characters. Show the male characters being feminist and being hot and sexy and masculine in it. And that will influence people's thought. I mean, film and TV has a lot of power. That's why we're here today, of course. And yeah, and again, like I think it starts at a young age too. So looking closely at the movies, at the films and TV shows that young boys are watching and how they treat women. And
I have a lot of hope for Gen Z. I don't know if I have the same ratio of hope for baby boomers to get on board with the fact that
it's close to being out of the hard
women are humans. It's a hard one for them. So yeah, I think that change is slow, evolution's slow. I think the next generation's so fucking cool. And they just like do not care about your sexuality or how you identify what you're into.
They really don't care.
They don't. They just want you. I think they're just passionate about being engaged with things that make you passionate. You know, like I think that passion points for them surpass any of the boxes of identity that we've loved to retrofit ourselves. You know, with.
Yeah, with FullScreen, we work with Gen Z so much. They're a huge part of our audience.
And how old is Gen Z now?
Gen Z,
1996, born after 1996. Youth.
Yeah. So I would say like the teenagers to about maybe 23, 24 years old. And there's a lot of flaws going on with that generation, particularly as it relates to their use of devices and lack of wanting independence and a life outside of technology. But that's a whole nother conversation. But what's good to see about them is that they are so, like Dana was saying, you know, over labels. They would rather be, you know, pro and for something and stand for something than be anti, which is a whole different kind of paradigm of seeing the world where they really want to get behind things. And who wants to get behind sexism? Yes, there are those people, you know, in some areas, all right, perhaps. But even there, you know, nobody wants to say like, oh, come out and say like, I'm for this. So as trends in culture and what people wear on their sleeve of who they are as an identity becomes more and more, you know, aware or shown in like social media. People are wanting to say, you know, I'm for this. I'm a feminist. I'm for equal rights. I'm for LGBTQ. I'm for etc. So that's a really good thing with a younger generation. So it's exciting. I think Dana was right. Like it's pretty hopeful for Gen Z.
So there is hope.
I think there's hope.
As someone who is a little bit of a pessimist, I do have hope for these young weirdos who are going to release us from these weird shackles that we put on ourselves.
And they would actually love being called young weirdos.
Yes, they love the term like little weirdos. Nonconformity is really important to them. And in fact, more and more, even at the age of like 12, right now, young people are coming out and saying, I don't identify with either gender. I'm kind of non-binary. And that trend is just going to keep growing exponentially towards saying, I'm not necessarily male or female in my identity. My body may be one way, but let's just all like get rid of this BS. And that's starting with 12-year-olds around. So I think, yeah, I'm optimistic for sure. But we got to keep doing the work in the media for sure, too.
And showing anyone who's ever felt like the other, I think it's really important that there's media that makes them feel like they exist. We just did a show with a trans artist character, or In real life,
Miles McKenna.
Plug. In real life, he is trans male, and we cast him in this high school show just as himself, a trans guy who likes art and, likes his friends. And I think we put maybe one line in the whole series about hormone injections just to plant the context clue. But his character wasn't about him being trans. It had nothing to do, with the storyline. He was who he was. And, all the comments we got were from these young kids were just crying, being finally I see me on TV. I've never, this is so incredible. And just to acknowledge that there is, there are different folks and that's normal and we don't need to call attention to it or, always be so on the nose. People are smart and intuitive if you just start, our brains store stories in the same place they store facts, and that's where you get this unconscious bias, is when you never see stories about the other, you sort of believe the narrative about them or lack thereof, and when you start to see that as normal, your brain interprets it as normal. So,
yeah. Totally. Yeah.
Young weirdos. I like them.
Do you have any other takeaways from today?
I would say, well, we still have, a few more hours of it so far. One of the biggest things that stuck with me is that media itself can be the solution to the problem that it created, was a line that we heard earlier. And that is so true. It's kind of listen, guys, we got ourselves into this mess, but we can get ourselves out just the same way. It just takes people who get into the industry and get into entertainment with, the reason being because they want to make a difference in culture. And, you see, I think that's everybody at this event is probably that kind of person and really cares about what they do. And so the more people that we can get that are passionate about wanting to make the world a better place, into this creative field, the better. So yeah, I would say that was the biggest thing for me so far.
Mine's very tactical, but I think we're both, McKenna and I are developing our own sort of TV programming and writing scripts and writing novels. We both love what we do. Shout out FullScreen, but I know that we also have these creative endeavors and
side projects,
side hustles, really. And I never wanted to do the traditional start in a mailroom route. I started in marketing and fashion, and I've taken this weird zigzag sort of journey to entertainment, and I'm on the executive side and the network side a little bit now. But someone went earlier was just I just found people who wrote my favorite episodes of TV, found them on Facebook, wrote on their Facebook wall twice a year, was hey, what's up? And eventually they got coffee with me. So I was oh my God, I need to find my favorite writers and directors of certain episodes of TV that have influenced me and just literally try to find them on Facebook
and be confident and be
everyone's
bold.
An approachable human, I guess. When you're younger, it can be so scary, the idea of networking. It sounds so stuffy. But the idea of being wait a second, these people are accessible. We're in a town where they're accessible. I have enough accolades and stuff under my belt now that I can be confident approaching someone who's an expert in something I want to be an expert in and, be humble and learn from them. And I'm going to go home and add a lot of people on Facebook tonight.
And wish them a happy birthday every year.
Yeah, every year. Happy birthday.
On Facebook.
Build that. It's the long con, it really is.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of inspiration at this summit. Victoria Mahoney, who I always find so inspiring to listen to, said a couple of things that stuck with me. The first is that we have no time to sing songs and clap. We have work to do. The illusion that there is momentum is a lie. And that's what the data keeps showing us over and over again. Dee Reese, who's the writer and director of Mudbound, said, "I am not broken. I am free." There was a panel about Strong is Beautiful where there were a lot of athletes and women in sports talking. And Jordan Weber, the Olympic gold medalist, said that strength comes from waking up and putting 100% effort in everything that you're doing. Christine Simmons, who's the president and COO of the LA Sparks, said that women are already strong. Feminism is about changing the way that people see that strength. Gabrielle Carteris said, "You are the visionaries and the world is ready." Now, Greta Gerwig, who directed Lady Bird, which is, I think, a perfect film, run out and see that, said that if there's only ever one kind of person telling their stories, you miss the whole landscape of experiences. And she also said this, producing women's films is not charitable, it's a market. And I think this is the thing that we need to repeat over and over again, because the data shows us making films about women or women making films is not actually risky. They actually make more money than films starring or helmed by men. It is a myth. So remember that. Producing films by women is not a charitable act. It is a market. Then at the end of the day, I sat down with Shirley Davis, and here's what she said.
I'm now sitting with Shirley Davis, who's the Executive Vice President of Production for Alcon Entertainment. Shirley, what about this day?
I think this day was pretty great. For the third conference of this Women in Entertainment Summit, I think it had a lot of great keynote speakers and diverse panels.
What are some of the things you're taking away from this that you heard today?
I really enjoyed the panel with sports people talking about using our femininity in the workplace. And
you can be a feminist and still be feminine?
Right, and that you could be strong and be your authentic.
Strong is Beautiful. Is that the name of that panel?
Exactly. I especially love the person from Barbie who spoke about her negotiations with her boss and walking in with a preconceived notion of how it would work itself out. And he surprised her and asked her about her as a person.
Yeah, that was brilliant. She prepped like a man to go in and demand her promotion, not realizing she was dealing with a guy who was much more sensitive and nurturing.
Right, and I think that it then challenged her to just be more authentic in any of her dealings.
I was surprised that they didn't talk about this much today, but this whole, we're 3 weeks out from the Harvey Weinstein Me Too campaign. Does this feel like a watershed moment to you? Does it feel like something's going to change?
Absolutely. I think that people are cleaning house, and I hope that it becomes more of a permanent adjustment in companies' policies about sexual harassment. I think that there's so many people that are speaking up that I don't think this could be easily brushed under the carpet, and it's also interesting that it's coming from both sexes. So that's an interesting twist in the usual harassment cases that have come up.
Was there anything that someone said where you're like, oh man, yeah, that was it?
I think that they're speaking to networking and teaching people to be themselves as women and continue to level the playing field, and that the time for the unbalanced workforce is coming to an end.
I think once there are enough women in the room, the whole thing changes. We just
Right,
have to
and
get the
that
women in the room.
actually, to your point, it was discussing repeatedly, and it started with Geena Davis in the keynote morning speech about changing your media content so people could see roles for women as CEOs, as politicians, so that you could have life imitating art, was definitely something that was underscored today.
Yeah, that is the whole point, I think.
I agree.
You've been listening to The Other 50%, A History of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. I'd like to thank the Women in Entertainment for the conference. I'd like to thank Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Allison McQuaid for the music. You can find us at theother50%.com, all spelled out in words, for added features, bios of my guests, the blogs, the merchandise. You can also find us on Stitcher, Podbay, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Please subscribe, rate, leave a review. and tell all your friends. Thanks for listening. See you next time.